Hi, this is Nasir, and today I'm going to give my talk on authorship ethics and overview of research on the state of practice. The agenda of today's presentation is that I will start with defining authorship criteria, and authorship order, and then I will present the finding of this study on authorship practice and authorship issues. Authorship, it means to name an individual on any research article, research paper, study, or report. And the question comes that who should be the author of any research article? The answer is that the one who have a substantial contribution to the conducting and reporting of research and stand responsible for the work while receiving a due credit. Who should decide the authorship? Ones who carried out the work reported in the publication. I mean, the group of people who are involved in the research project, they should decide the authorship. Majority of the publishers of scientific journals, they provide authorship criteria in the authorship guideline. And most of them follow the criteria published by ICMJE. ICMJE is that International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. And the criteria consist of 4 points. The one who qualify all these 4 points would be regarded as an author of any research article. The first point is that individual have substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of the data. So at least one have contribution in any of these phases of the work, and then he or she should be involved in drafting of the article or revising it critically for important intellectual content. And the individual should give the final approval of the version that should be published, and the individual should stand responsible or should agree to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated or resolved. As I mentioned that majority of the publishers follow ICMJE criteria, I have included some examples here. I've visited the sites of these publishers elsewhere. They explicitly follow the ICMJE criteria. Wiley Online Library have given a criteria that is similar to ICMJE criteria. Springer's criteria is also in line with the ICMJE criteria. For example, if I click it, if you see that they have explicitly mentioned that the ICMJE criteria should be followed to be an author of the article. Okay, so what is the state of practice regarding authorship criteria? Studies reported that a majority of researchers do not respect authorship criteria. For example, in a study conducted with the Swedish researchers, it is reported that 53% of the researchers did not respect the authorship criteria. Similarly, in a survey of self-reported contribution statements, 61% of the researchers were not following the authorship criteria. A large number of researchers are not aware of the authorship criteria. For instance, a study reported that 42% of the research leaders failed to correctly identify the authorship criteria. Similarly, in another study conducted with the Jordanian researchers, reported that only 27% were able to recognize the authorship criteria. There are like some questionable perceptions of the research leaders about the authorship. For example, in a study, 14% of the senior researchers stated that supervising or leading a research team qualifies one to be an author. That means a research team lead or a supervisor, they are the default author of the papers of their subordinates or their students. A large number of respondents believe that drafting a manuscript should not be regarded as an authorship criterion. When it comes to the authorship order, we don't have any standard guidelines on authorship order, and that is why authorship order is treated differently in different research disciplines. For instance, in most cases, authorship order exhibits the amount of contribution by the authors in decreasing order. The most substantial contributor would be given first place as the first author, and then co-authors would be listed in decreasing order of the contribution. In some research disciplines, it is considered that first and fourth author, or first or the last author, they would be like considered as equal contributors. And in some subjects of social sciences, for example, economics, the authors are listed in the alphabetical order instead of the contribution, measuring the contributions. So since we have seen that authorship criteria is not respected by the researchers, or they are not aware of the authorship criteria, and we don't have any guidelines for authorship order, or we have like a different measuring mechanisms for authorship order. So there are various reported disagreements about authorship in the studies, and mainly these disagreements concerning authorship naming and order. For example, a study reported that 46% of the respondents reported the disagreements regarding the authorship naming. Similarly, in the same study, 38% of the respondents highlighted such issues about the authorship order. And female early career and mid-career researchers are primarily involved in such agreements. Senior researchers, they did not report such disagreements. There are various practices in which authors, researchers are involved knowingly or unknowingly, and those practices are regarded as unethical practices. For example, assigning inappropriate authorship order. In studies, various respondents reported that they were not given due place in authorship order that they think that they would be placed. Another authorship, unethical practice of authorship is the hostage authorship. It is a phenomena where you include an individual in your article as an author because of unavoidable pressures. And these individuals could be your bosses, your senior management, or maybe your supervisors. Various studies have reported this event of hostage authorship, and the studies, like a large number of respondents, researchers, they reported that they have been witness or they have been victim of this practice. Other unethical practices are honorary or guest authorship, gift authorship, and ghost authorship. Honorary authorship refers to giving authorship or gifting authorship to your seniors, mainly because of two reasons: to please them as a courtesy, or to add prestige to your paper. And like studies reported that honorary authorship is being practiced in various disciplines. Gift authorship is, again, it is quite similar with the honorary authorship. The only difference is that in honorary authorship, we award authorship to the seniors. And in gift authorship, we award authorship to our peers, to the ones who don't qualify to be an author, but we gift them authorship. And these both practices, like researchers, they do it knowingly. The last one is the ghost authorship. Ghost authorship refers to the practice that if we are not including a deserving individual as an author in the paper, a person who has contributed substantially in the research work, but he or she were not given place in the paper as an author. And a large number of researchers have reported in the studies that they are victim of this practice. When it comes to the software engineering, unfortunately, I could not find any study that is investigating authorship ethics in software engineering research. So I cannot say that finding of my study also reflects the software engineering research, but the consistency of findings from various disciplines shows that maybe the trend would be similar in the software engineering research. But I think it is a dire need to conduct an empirical study with the software engineering researchers to investigate the state of practice on authorship. To conclude with, what we learned is that the most practiced criteria is the one defined by ICMJE. Authorship criteria provide guidelines to decide the authorship naming, but it is silent about the authorship order. Researchers at large, they do not respect the authorship criteria, and mainly because of lack of awareness. And the practices regarding authorship order vary across various disciplines. And there are various reported disagreements regarding authorship naming and authorship order. And various unethical practices are also reported in the research that researchers are involved in knowingly or unknowingly. Authorship ethics is a very well-researched area in the field of health sciences and its allied disciplines, and it has got little attention in social sciences, but unfortunately, in software engineering research, it has not catch the attention of the software engineering researchers. So, but I think there are some potential questions that software engineering researchers need to answer on. For example, are we aware of research ethics? Are we aware of authorship criteria? Do we respect authorship criteria? How many of us are involved in unethical practice of authorship? Did our early career researchers ever face hostage-like situation? Do we gift authorship to each other? And so on. There are a lot of questions, and we are trying to answer these questions in our next survey-based study. So thank you very much. I am available after this presentation for the questions. I welcome your questions, and you can also reach me through this email address, nasir.mehmood.minhas@bth.se. Thank you.
Students take.
My name is Nasir, and today I'm going to present my paper. The topic of my paper is Authorship Ethics, an overview of research on the state of practice. So I'm working at Blekinge Institute of Technology, Karlskrona, Sweden, and I'm a PhD student. I'm in the last year of my PhD. So
unlike the other topics that we have seen today, my topic is a bit different. My work is on ethics of research, and specifically I will talk about the authorship ethics. So here is the agenda for the day. That I will start with the definition of authorship. Then I will discuss authorship criteria, authorship order, and then I will present my findings that I identified from the empirical studies on authorship practice. So what is authorship? All of us who are presenting here or who have joined this workshop, majority of us are authors, and we know that authorship is that whenever we write some article or paper, and then obviously we put our name on the articles, who should be named as an author, the state, the one who have substantially contributed in conducting reporting of the research and stand responsible for the work while receiving the due credit. And the ones who are working on any article or any project, they are responsible to decide that who should be the author on any article, basically. Authorship criteria. Authorship criteria actually it defines that what should be considered while defining the authorship of any individual. So publisher of all scientific journals provide authorship criteria in author's guideline. And most followed authorship criteria among this such discipline is the one defined by the ICMJE. It is International Committee of Medical Journals and Editors. And this criteria defines that it recommends actually the 4 points or 4 criterion that is supposed to be fulfilled to be an author of any in any article. The first is that the individual should have substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of the data for the work, and drafting the work or revising it critically for important intellectual content, and final approval to be published, and agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. In addition to this, it is also put a responsibility to the authors that the authors should know that which part of the work is done by which author, and who stands for which part of the work, basically. So to be an author, an individual needs to fulfill all these 4 criterions. Then he could be the author, listed as an author on the paper. As I told that the most criteria is the ICMJE criteria. I have placed some examples over here. For instance, elsewhere they follow ICMJE criteria. Wiley Online Library follow this criteria. Springer follow this criteria. IEEE criteria is quite similar to the ICMJE criteria. For instance, if we click on any of this, so it is not appearing in my main screen. So anyway, so it defines, I can read, according to the guidelines of authorship established by the International Committee of Medical Journals, ICMJ, all persons designated as authors should qualify the authorship, and all those who qualify should be listed. So they have explicitly mentioned this criteria specified by ICMJ. What is the state of practice regarding the authorship criteria? When we talk about the authorship criteria, there are 2 aspects that should be considered. Number 1 is that who should be named as an author, and the second is that in which order the names should be listed. So when it comes to the actual state of the practice, studies revealed that a majority of researchers do not respect the authorship criteria. For instance, a study conducted with the Swedish researchers report that 53% of the researchers did not respect the authorship criteria. So this is the result of a survey where authors themselves told that they did not respect the authorship criteria, or they don't know about the authorship criteria. Similarly, in a survey of self-reported contribution statements, these are the statements that we contribute while submitting the papers. So 60%, 61% of the researchers were not following the authorship criteria. That means that our contribution that we define while submitting an article, so those were not correct or not according to the authorship criteria. So a large number of authors are not aware of the authorship criteria. For example, a study report that 42% of the research leaders, when we call a research leader means senior researchers, fail to correctly identify the authorship criteria. A study conducted with the Jordanian researcher report that only 27% of the respondents were aware of the authorship criteria. So some questionable perceptions of the research leaders about the authorship. In a study, 14% of the senior researchers stated that supervising or leading a research team qualifies one to be an author. A large number of respondents believe that drafting a manuscript should not be regarded as an authorship criterion. So these are the questionable perceptions that without contributing, only supervising or leading a research team, could anyone be an author? Okay, so the next thing is, first was that authorship criteria about the naming of the person on an article. So the second thing is that in which order author's name should be placed. So there are no standard guidelines. So therefore, it is treated differently in different research disciplines. In most cases, authorship order exhibits the amount of contribution by the authors. And normally in a decreasing order. For instance, the first author would be the most substantial contributor of the paper. Some of the research discipline consider first as an equal contributors, and in some subjects of social sciences, authors are listed in an alphabetical order. So we don't have any standard criterion for the authorship order. So when people are not aware of authorship criteria and we don't have any standard guidelines about the authorship order, so there must be some disagreements as well. So authorship disagreements concerning naming and order are common among the researchers. For instance, 46% of the respondents of a study reported disagreements regarding authorship naming. 38% respondent highlighted such issues about the authorship order. Similarly, in another study, 59% of the researchers experience of getting involved in disagreements about authorship naming, and 48% respondents face such issues regarding the authorship order. So the primary cause of the disagreement is that different methods of measuring contribution, and importantly, female and early career and mid-career researchers were often involved in such kind of disagreements. So there are various practices that maybe we are doing, and it is reported in the research that authors are involved in these practices, and these practices are considered as an unethical practices. For example, assigning inappropriate authorship order. 28% of a study reported that their experience about inappropriate authorship order. Similarly, 51% of the respondent of another study reported facing pressures regarding authorship order. So, and other unethical practices, the hostage authorship. Hostage authorship refers to include an undeserving individual as an author because of unavoidable pressures. So hostage authorship could be like, as I told earlier, that there is a misconception among the research leaders that a supervisor and a research team leader should be automatically an author of the paper. So 30% of the respondents of a study told that they were forced to add an undeserving author. And another study, 63% of the researchers who are working at senior administrative posts are often included as author without any contribution in the studies of their subordinates. 89% of the respondents of a survey reported their experience regarding the pressures from senior researchers to include them as co-authors in their publications. Other unethical practices are honorary or guest authorship and gift authorship. So these two are quite similar because this is the practice that a genuine author do, like it include the name of any individual willingly, but who is not like the contributor of that article. Authorship refers to including the name of senior authors to oblige them or to increase the prestige of your paper. And gift authorship, it refers to towards the like you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So normally it is granted as a favor to your peers and all those things. So there are large number of like people who are practicing this. For example, regarding honorary authorship, 69% of the respondents reported that they awarded honorary authorship. Similarly, 60% of the respondents of a study reported that they are witness of the gift authorship. And the last unethical practice is the ghost authorship. Ghost authorship refers to the practice of denying authorship to the contributor who should have been included. So this is another practice that is common among the researchers, that someone who contributed significantly, but he or she would not be included as an author in the paper. So this was the overall like what is happening in various research disciplines regarding authorship practices. So when it comes to the authorship practices in software engineering, up till like at my best knowledge, I could not find even a single study that discuss authorship practice in software engineering. Therefore, I would not say that finding of my are relevant to the software engineering research. However, the similarity of finding from various disciplines encourages me to create an analogy that authorship state of practice among the software engineering researchers may be similar to this study's finding, but I would emphasize that empirical investigations need to be carried out among the software engineering researchers. So what are the conclusions? The most followed authorship criteria is one defined by ICMJE. The authorship criteria provide guide to decide the authorship naming. The criteria are silent about the authorship order. Researchers at large do not respect the authorship criteria because of lack of awareness. The practices related to authorship order vary across the different disciplines. There are various reported events of disagreements regarding authorship naming and order, regardless of the discipline, gender, and experience. Researchers are involved in the unethical authorship practices. Most highlighted unethical practices are hostage authorship, honorary or guest authorship, gift authorship, and ghost authorship. So there are some potential questions that I am leaving here, and actually these are the questions that I am trying to answer in my current ongoing study. So these questions are that being software engineering researchers, are we aware of research ethics? Are we aware of authorship criteria? Do we respect authorship criteria? How many of us are involved in unethical authorship? Did our early career researchers ever face hostage-like situation? Do we gift authorship to each other? Do we ever include a senior researcher without any contribution? And there are many more questions that we need to answer. Thank you very much. I think I am on time.
Nasir, thank you. I think it was a great presentation, and you asked some questions that we do not see very often, but it's an important issue. So it was very enlightening for me. But I just remembered Justin's comments about like professionals engaged in like some unethical or like facing ethical dilemmas. They are not willing to talk. It might happen to the researchers as well who experience this or who actually do these like unethical issues, like perhaps they are not willing to talk themselves. So it's difficult to get answers to those questions. We have a question from the audience, so I will start with the audience questions. How much is the H-index responsible for these issues and the increased pressure on producing papers? For 20 years ago, it was fine to produce a paper a year. These days, you are expected to produce a lot.
I think this is like a very relevant and very good question. And this is one of the reasons that the race now we have to follow basically. is compelling the researchers to do such practices, to gift authorship to each other, and these things. And similarly, the hostage authorship is also the reason of this particular race. I'm agree with this question. Basically, it's not a question; it's a comment. So actually, it is happening. This is happening because of this race. I hope I answered the question of Hildal.
Yeah, it's
Hildal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, H-index, and then your comment is H-index and the increased pressure on researchers to publish contributes to unethical behavior.
A race among in us as a researchers, basically. So this is the big reason, basically. Yes, I agree.
Okay, other questions from the audience, or do you have any answers to the questions listed on the screen?
Anyone who is daring enough to answer any of the questions that
it is very difficult to answer, I guess. When I have an co-author in the audience, which I have to say, like, I had absolutely no problems whatsoever writing papers with her. Hi, Jennifer, again. But I think, it might be also perhaps some early career researchers may have experienced some difficult situations, or perhaps they have less say. It might depend on the culture. Do you have any cultural findings? Perhaps in, I don't know, in Western countries where you are seen more like peers, it might not be an issue. And in East, there's a huge hierarchy.
No, I can understand. Yes, in for example, in countries which are not technologically advanced, the issue is much bigger over there. But the issue is in the Western world, in Europe, and I have mentioned various studies from different European countries. So the issue is here as well, but the issue is bigger when it comes to the developing countries and the countries which are not advanced in research and technology.
Okay, and have you find any what can we do to prevent this? Basically, do you have any solutions, or is there any country actually have a solution for that?
Honestly speaking, before doing this research, I never, whenever I submitted my paper, I never read the guidelines, and I never read the authorship criteria while submitting my paper. So the first and recommendation is at least we should read those recommendations and guidelines before submitting our papers, and we should be honest enough to include the relevant people in the paper. And second thing is, I think there is a need to create awareness among the researchers about the authorship ethics, and maybe especially for the early career researchers, we need some sort of trainings. Actually, why I conducted this study and why I'm conducting another empirical study, it encouraged me from my PhD course that was ethics of research. So conducted by one of our senior professor, Klaus Wulin. So that encouraged me to do this research and to continue my work towards this direction. There is dire need to create awareness among the researchers.
Well, definitely. Well, to confess, I didn't know about any official criteria myself. I was just doing what I have seen from my PhD supervisors and, continue the tradition.
Yeah. This is happening basically.
Okay, there are some comments. So quickly, I want to go over some of them. It would be interesting to have authors rate the contributions of their co-authors. Some individuals really overstate or understate their own contributions, said Alicia.